Good evening, Horizon House residents. It's such a wonderful summer day again, and we're so pleased, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I love to start with acknowledging all those who've gone before us and cleared our path, but especially give honor to the Duwamish tribe upon whose land we stand. And so it is great pleasure tonight that we have a program for you that our member Bill Kepper is fairly new, and he brought us again some diversity to our diversity awareness group. I'm Sally Wren, and it's my privilege to have Bill Kepper come up and introduce his guests. Thank you.
Well, our guests tonight are from the Greater Seattle Business Association, which is normally just known as the GSBA. And they have been around in Seattle for over 40 years, and they are very heavily involved in small business, tourism, civil rights, and they also have one of the best scholarship funds you'll find anywhere. And our presenters tonight, our guests, are Jeff Boyer, who is a fundraiser for the GSBA Scholarship and Education Fund, the oldest LGBTQ scholarship fund in the United States. Prior to his work with the GSBA, Jeff fundraised for Child Haven, the Upper Reading Foundation, Seattle Pacific University, and he's been volunteered as a trainer and phone worker for the King County Crisis Line with at-risk youth at the Lambert House. In his spare time, Jeff cares for a plethora of houseplants and takes as many camping trips as possible. Our guest speaker is Stacy Harbor Van Hoy, who is the program manager for the GSBA Scholarship and Education Fund. This entails overseeing the application and the scholar selection process, recruiting and planning programming for future, current, and alumni scholars. Prior to her work at the GSBA, Stacy taught middle school and high school English language arts, social studies, and science. She is also a volunteer coach and trainer for junior roller derby, and a regular volunteer in a two-teens high school, Chief Self International in the Senate School. When she has free time, she enjoys skating with her friends and enjoying the outdoors. Introduced Jeff and Stacy.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bill, for having us. All right, so we wanted to give you this evening an overview of GSBA. Some are familiar with us and some are not, so we want to make sure you know who we are and the awesome work that we're doing. And then we, of course, want to specifically talk about scholarship, because that's our department of GSBA, and then just how you can contribute and help to the work that we do with our scholars. So Jeff has a video we want to share with you first. It gives you an overview of just some of this work that we are doing at GSBA.
The GSBA Scholarship and Education Fund was established in the early 90s when a group of GSBA business members learned about the extraordinary challenges facing LGBTQ youth, like systemic financial barriers and a rejection from their families, and how this impacted their dreams for an education. Using their businesses as platforms, these members combined their efforts to issue the very first GSBA Scholarship Awards in 1991 to 2 students, totaling $5,000. A lot has changed since these days of passing a hat for donations at monthly GSBA luncheons. Today,
Today we do a lot. Fast forward. There we go.
luncheons. Today,
Today. It'll happen. Give it one more try and then can move on.
You'll have to tell us about today.
I'm going to talk about today.
Graduation. So, in 2020, the Beaks Open Arms
Into today, right there.
The program serves over 60 students who each receive an average of over $8,300 a year, renewable for up to 4 years. Too often, unexpected expenses can derail a student's path to graduation. So, in 2020, the Beaks Open Arms Fund was established to allow students to request emergency funding for when a car bill pops up, if their laptop dies suddenly, or if their hours are cut at work and they've ran out of food. The less students have to worry about making ends meet, the more they're able to focus on their education. On top of financial support, the fund supports students holistically with the Leadership Academy, which provides mentorship, academic advising, and virtual and in-person workshops to help them thrive as LGBTQ+ people in and outside of the workplace. Each August, GSBA scholars gather for the Leadership Immersion Weekend, where they come together in community, learn from each other, and attend a series of comprehensive workshops. None of this work is possible without your support. Each one of you here today plays an instrumental role in advancing equity in education and eliminating barriers for LGBTQ+ students. So on behalf of each one of our scholars, thank you so much for your support.
And Jeff was the narrator of the video. All right, so definitely focusing on scholarships. That's what's near and dear to our heart. However, GSBA does quite a bit more than that. So we are Washington State's LGBTQ+ and Allied Chamber of Commerce. And we are the largest in North America as well. And our mission is to combine business development, leadership, and social action to expand economic opportunities for the LGBTQ+ community and those who support equality for all. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but we are a chamber of commerce, so it's definitely business focused. But we also believe that fostering leadership with our students, being involved in advocacy in Olympia, all those things are interrelated. If we really want to support business and students, we also need to be in Olympia and advocating legislatively as well. The three programs you'll hear about a lot when we talk about GSBA are these three. So here we are in the middle, scholarship and education, but we also support marketing to tourists who want to visit and know that Seattle and Washington are great places to visit as an LGBTQ+ person. So that's called Travel Out Seattle. And then another program that runs under GSBA is the Capitol Hill Business Alliance. Our office is in Capitol Hill, just up the street, and so we also do a lot of support in our neighborhood as well. However, the middle is most important to me. So here's a little overview of our scholarship. We've been around since 1991, and we've invested $6 million in 535 scholars. And you can see on that arrow that goes up the side, we started with just 2 students, and then we're just ever growing. So it just went to doubling and then tripling, and we've just continued that impact. You can see at the top, there's a little bit of a dip. We have 50 students in 2023, and that's just coming out of the pandemic and the impact that that had economically on everyone. But we have goals to be right back up there next year and be back to 60 scholars and beyond. So that's where we're at today. And that picture you see there is of our scholars celebration that we just had in May. So we like to come together and party. And what makes our scholarship so unique is that it's more than just money. So I think about it like a triangle. And you have supportive sides, but you always have the foundation. So we do provide financial support. Our scholars get a range of awards just based on need and what school they're going to. But they also get educational programming throughout their time as a scholar. And the most important part, just the foundation of this triangle, is this connection to community. So our scholars are from all over in Washington State, but they attend schools all over the nation. And so what's really important to us as a scholarship program is to make sure that they know that GSBA is always their home. No matter where they go to school, we're always there to support them financially, with community, with education. So that's really, really unique, I would say, to a scholarship program. So one really exciting thing that's coming up for us in August is Immersion Weekend. On that educational side, we call it Leadership Academy. All of our scholars are leaders that have vision on how they want to change the world. And so what we do is we just provide programming to help them achieve what they already possess. Right? They're already leaders. We're just going to give you resources, connect you to our business community in the chamber, and make sure that you have everything that you need to achieve this goal that you have. And so Immersion Weekend is this really fun weekend that we get to come together in person in August. It's the one time of the year that most of them are not in school or working or in internships. And it's really like our summer camp. And what we do is we come together as this family. This is their GSBA family. We want to expand our connections to one another. We want to do a deeper exploration of who we are as leaders now, and then just where do we want to be in the future. So some examples of workshops that students are going to do here in just a couple weeks. We're going to talk about credit, which is not really exciting, but it's really important that college students understand that they need to start building positive credit for themselves now so that they can access apartments and car loans and all the things that they're going to need in the future. So we talk about those kind of logistical things like that, but then we also talk about next steps as far as internships, graduate school, where do you want to be next, getting insight from folks who have walked that path before them, and then just how to get involved in things like advocacy in Olympia. So one great thing that GSBA has is a lobbyist in Olympia advocating for business and queer business in particular. And our lobbyist is also an alumni, received a scholarship from us in the past, which is pretty exciting. And so she's coming in to really work with scholars on that advocacy piece. It's really important that you understand how things work in our state legislature and how you can be a part of the process and that your voice is heard. So those are the things that we like to bring to Leadership Academy, which is that supportive side of that triangle, really giving educational programming that they need to be successful. We also allow access to anything that GSBA does. So as a Chamber of Commerce, we've always got events going on, networking events, business-focused education events, and scholars that have access to all of that. And then we also do just online workshops for them throughout the year when they are off and at their colleges across the nation. So when we get close to internship application time in January, we come together and talk about that process, how to find them, filling out your application, how you follow up after you've turned it in, just really giving them a leg up on that process to better enable their success to achieve them. And all kinds of other things around wellness and successful interviewing. So some really exciting things that are going on at GSBA Scholarship is we are working on an internship and job board for our scholars. So leveraging all of these businesses that are a part of GSBA, they provide the jobs and our scholars get to apply for them. And really just kind of bridging that conversation between our business, our tourism, our scholars, and just all those different areas I showed you. And we're also really thinking about, now that we are coming out of a pandemic, how can we really make impact on the greater Seattle community? So one thing we're working on right now is just doing site-specific scholarship workshops. It doesn't have to be GSBA. It can be any scholarship. And giving insider tips and tricks as a program manager to organizations who are working with more marginalized students who have a tougher time accessing the system. So some of our partners are Seattle Schools, YWCA, other community groups in South Seattle in particular that we're working with. And lastly, we're expanding Immersion Weekend in 2024. I'm not sure why I'm doing this, but I am. I'm one person, but I'm going to do it. We really want to add a second opportunity for scholars to come together and be with their community and hear from these guest speakers and just really expand that knowledge base together. So 2 events. And I would say I end on the scholarship side with this slide that's just more important now than ever that we exist as a scholarship fund. So we've always needed to be here. This has always been a student group that has been marginalized in educational spaces. However, one thing that has risen is legislation that's really targeting our trans and gender diverse scholars. And 50% of our scholars are trans and gender diverse. And so since that's the group that's being targeted in several states, over 400 pieces of legislation are floating around right now targeting those students, then GSBA is needed more than ever. The other change that has recently occurred is our Supreme Court has done away with affirmative action. A lot of feelings around affirmative action in the world, but one thing we know it does directly impact is our BIPOC scholars as a marginalized group of students, access to a system that comes very easily for others. It's really important that that is on our minds and that we're continuing to provide all these amazing educational services for our scholars. 76% of our scholars identify as BIPOC, so it's just now more than ever, we need that whole supportive triangle. Yeah, so we wanted to switch to a video that's going to work because I have positive attitude here, and just highlight one of our scholars. That's fine. It sounds like it's working. One of our scholars so you can just see her story and what she has to say about being a GSBA scholar.
My family, my grandmother and my mom, they grew up in absolute poverty, where they didn't have enough food to eat. And we immigrated here when I was 8 years old so that I could have a chance to get into the education that would get me to the future that my mother would always dream about for me. I'm the first person to go to college in my family, but thankfully I've met a lot of mentors who have helped me along the way, and now I'm going to be starting medical school at the University of Washington. My name is Alejandra Silva Hernandez. I'm originally from Mexico City. I grew up in Oaxaca with my grandmother and 5 cousins. As an immigrant, I realized very quickly that I couldn't take a step back. That political became personal, and that's when I realized that I wasn't alone in this journey. Existing as a queer woman, as an immigrant, even in a state like Washington, it still wasn't safe. And it wasn't something that I could accept, but that I could do something about. So that's when I realized that I could have the power, I could get that platform to make change. For me, coming as a physician, I'm going to be working with underrepresented patients because of what we see outside of the clinic impacts you at a very real level. If a patient can't get to the hospital because of the lack of transportation, or there's a language barrier, or there's a new policy that does not allow you to get the care that you need and deserve, then that's where I'm going to be stepping in to make that change happen. The GSBA scholarship meant gaining that community. With the scholars, even though we all went to different schools, we were able to hang out outside of like any sort of events that were there. During Pride, we would come together and like every year we would see each other, even after we completed our degrees. I still have friends from 2012 who are now like in other countries, who are now CEOs and directors of their programs that I still talk to, that I still ask questions, and they're still rooting for me. I'm starting to accept that truth, that I am a role model, that I am carving this new path. And I think it's been really hard to get here, and I'm starting to give myself some grace. But I think a way that other scholars can also take on that role model cape and really own it is to realize that our very existence is resistance. Our very existence in college, in graduate school, in whatever field you're pursuing is very new. There's not a lot of like queerness in these spaces yet. Being in these spaces, it can be really intimidating to raise your hand in a classroom with 400 other students, but our voice is needed. We bring so much diversity. We're able to share our own lived experiences and how we view the world, and it's really needed at the table. I am going to be the first doctor in my family. My mom didn't have the privilege of continuing her education past 6th grade, and so she dreamt that I would go to college. So right now, to have been accepted to medical school is beyond her wildest dreams. And in all of our family and all of our lineage, this is the first generation where I'm going to become a doctor, and it's going to be life-changing, not just for myself, but for my family. This is something that's going to reverberate for generations. And when that advisor told me that I couldn't make it, that I should think about another career, like that could have easily been a way that I fall out of this pipeline. And there was so many of those moments where I could have just change my mind, because it did become too hard. When I first started on this path, I didn't know what it would take to get into medical school. But I do know that I wouldn't have made it without the GSBA scholarship. I'm 100% certain of that.
I was so lucky because I was there when we were filming that video. It was so good. So All 100 is a great example of just now more than ever. She started off with us in 2012 as an undergrad at UW, and then went on to grad school, got her master's degree. We also helped support her through her master's degree, which she did the entirely online during COVID. Pretty phenomenal, and it's a microbiology degree, so I don't even know how you do that online, but she persisted. And now she has just started, she's just in orientation now, and has started med school at University of Washington. And we have continued to support her. So one thing that is really phenomenal about our scholarship is really just that community piece that she references. Our scholars, we follow them to graduation. So once they become a scholar, we have, like the earlier video talked about, up to 4 years of funding. We really want to get them to graduation. And then, as they do become alumni of our program, they can reapply. And so that's what All 100 did, is came back and said, I want to go to grad school. And we said, great, and we're going to support you again. And then she came back and said, I want to go to med school, which had always been her dream, from 2012. And we said, great, and we are supporting her again. So we really, take that vision, that leadership that they show to us, and we just run with it. And I would say that makes us so unique to any other educational program that I've worked in. And that's my side, and I'm gonna hand it over to Jeff.
Thank you, Stacy. Can we have a round of applause for Stacy? Thank you. So I have had the privilege of being the fundraiser for the scholarship fund. It'll be 5 years this September. So I've been here a while. And so my job is to make sure that we have enough resources so that our students continue to be able to go to school, to thrive, so that we can have graduate school scholarships, et cetera, et cetera. And as you saw in that graph earlier, we did have a rough go of COVID. We had previous leadership that did a lot of work for us to have some reserve funds. And we went through those in the first 2 years of the pandemic. And so last year, as things were starting to come back, we did the best that we could, but you know, we're definitely looking forward at the future, coming out of the pandemic, and we need more support than we ever have before. So, how can you help? Thinking about time, talent, and treasure as the things that everyone has to offer. The first thing to talk about is volunteering. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of work to pull off a scholarship fund with this many students. And so Stacy works very hard to get, it's somewhere between 100 and 130 volunteers that come together to literally choose the students that are going to have the scholarship. So we would welcome any of you who are interested. That looks like reading applications, deciding who you think is, you know, kind of rises to the top of that, getting together with a small group, talking together amongst that small group, and then ultimately inviting usually 3 of those students in to interview with them. So Bill has been an interviewer, you said 4 years, is that right? So, and Judith Wood in the front, has it been 20 years? How many years have you interviewed?
I think only 12 to 13.
12 to 13, okay. So we've got some great people here, even in the Horizon House community, that you can ask about what that looks like. But we would love to see any of you that would like to give your time to us. And next, of course, is financial support. You will see in each of those booklets, there's a little pledge form with a QR code. You can send it in fully, and we, of course, accept all kinds of donations: cash, credit cards, stocks and securities, IRA distributions, literally, et cetera, et cetera. I was on staff when we had someone offer us a condo to sell, so lots of different options. We also have some bigger commitment opportunities. So one of the really exciting things that we do are called named scholarship funds. And we have those from private individuals who've given to those. We also have corporations. T-Mobile just re-upped theirs, so they're in their 6th year, I believe, of supporting a student specifically. But that way, we also allow you to build a relationship with a student. And so we have a lot of great examples of that. A particular donor comes to mind who our students refer to as her scholar mom. And that's also one of those things. We have donors who are really hands-on and want to meet the students. I've heard stories of those people helping move their student out of their dorm room. If you think about what kind of students we're working with, a lot of them have been kicked out of their homes. A lot of them don't have the same kind of familial resources that a lot of other students do. And so it's very important for GSBA to be there as a family. We also have a couple of giving circles. The first one is the Ruby Slipper Club. That's for anyone who gives $1,000 or more. And we do a really neat reception. I'm in the middle of procuring that space. Hopefully it will be at the Columbia Tower Club in September. But a great party to bring all those people together and say thank you to them. Emerald Slipper Club is the next one up, and that's for anyone who gives a $10,000 donation or makes a $10,000 pledge. Thank you, Judah. And then our Diamond Slipper Club is anyone who has given $50,000 or more in their lifetime. We also have really fun events. We are known for the caliber of events that we put on. So the first one, Equalux, is coming up November 18th. Bill and Sally and I and Wes sat at dinner today and talked about how maybe a Horizon House table could be in that. But very fun, live auction, silent auction, entertainment. The Supertonics are going to be our part of our entertainment this year, which is the men's and women's chorus elite group. So that'll be really fun. We're starting to do more partnership with them. Then we also have our Scholar Celebration, which is when we give out our awards. So we like to joke about how that's the event where we hide tissue boxes in with our centerpiece displays, because that's where we hear a lot of our scholar stories, which are very moving. And then we also have our Rainbow Legacy Club for anyone who's put the GSBA in their estate plans. That is it. So if any of you are interested in talking about making a larger gift, something like a named fund, or you want to talk about anything creatively, I have my business card in each one of those magazines as well in the back. And would love to take you out to coffee or lunch and talk about how we can make that happen. And with that, I think we can open it up for questions.
Well, do we have any questions?
This is more of a personal question, but is that Louise?
Yes, Louise Chernin.
Chernin. I got to know her through National Development Officers Association, or the Northwest Development Officers Association. And am I as correct in assuming that she's your
Louise is our most recently retired
did she?
CEO.
So she's no longer working with the legislature.
She is working with me in fundraising and development because you know her. She's very passionate about that. So
this is wonderful.
Yes, she is a wonderful person.
If Louise, she was in charge, wasn't she?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
She's our CEO.
And knowing her as I did, I mean, this is a wonderful organization. I've got to say, if she was part of it, and particularly since she was a leader and a wonderful woman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. 28 years was what she was. 19 as the CEO.
I know Washington is considered a blue state, but can you talk about anything that concerns you right now as far as legislation affecting this community that's happening in Olympia?
My God.
Thank goodness that some great things have happened recently. We recently, I can't remember the House bill number, but we did recently become a sanctuary state, which means that a person coming to Washington State to receive care and a doctor giving care in Washington State, whether that care be for gender affirming care, for a minor, or abortion services, that neither would be prosecuted. And so that's a fabulous thing that has come out of Washington recently. However, it doesn't mean that we don't have similar bills that have floated up but just haven't gotten out of committee in Washington State. So at the beginning of the legislative season, there was a presentation of a bill that would also ban gender affirming care in Washington State. It just didn't make it out of committee. And so folks didn't really hear about it, right? And so thank goodness we're a blue state. Things seem to be stifled for now, but that we do have these pieces of legislation being written, being proposed, means that we should be concerned and that we shouldn't sit back and be too comfortable. because, oh my goodness, we're surrounded by states that, like Idaho has now banned both abortions and gender affirming care, and so we have folks that are fleeing Idaho to receive care in Washington. We will feel the impact of just doctors coming to our state, folks coming to our state for care, and we're not sure what that impact will be yet. So I say I'm really grateful to live in Washington State. I am a parent of a trans child who receives gender affirming care, and I'm so grateful to be here. But I also am very, very aware that I can't travel with him. What if there were an emergency? Where would we go? Right? And so I think we just need to be aware, involved, listening, be relieved that we live here, and also realize that all the states around us who are being impacted.
Could you talk about the relationship of your organization to the Pride Foundation, which I think also gives scholarships?
Yeah, I will start on that one, but Stacy can grab it if she wants to add anything. We actually, in conjunction with Pride Foundation, put out our application, knowing that it is the same group of students who's likely applying to both. That just saves them the hassle of having to fill out 2 different applications. It's part of why we ask our students to reapply each year through that application, because we want our amazing students to also get as much Pride Foundation support as they can. So it's a great working relationship that we have between the 2 of us. And we end up giving about the same amount of money as they do. So it's roughly $1 million between both organizations that go to students. And something else in my head, but but yes, we work really well with Pride Foundation and are very grateful that they're here as well. Oh, I remembered. So as you saw the amounts of scholarships that we give, we have chosen to go deeper, and they have chosen to go broader. And so most Pride Foundation scholarships are about $500 to students, and ours, are typically $7,000 or $8,000 per student. So they end up giving those scholarships to hundreds of students, and we end up supporting a smaller amount that we really see leadership potential in, and that we want to give all of the resources that we have to become our next politicians and CEOs and people who are going to make a difference in the world.
This may be taking us in a different direction, but I've worked with Pride Foundation for a number of years with the scholarships, and I've always wondered if this is a business association. You said there's a CHBA, and what do they do? You said they give resources. I'm wondering, are they at all involved with the other business associations in trying to regenerate growth in Seattle as a city?
Yes, very much so. So the CHBA is essentially the Capitol Hill Neighborhood Business Association. I'm not 100% sure what it was called before. It might have been Capitol Hill. Anyway, they recently closed, and we were approached by some of the people in their leadership, and they asked if we would take it on. They felt that we already had a great presence in the Hill. We already had a really great reputation in Seattle, in the neighborhood specifically, and in the state. And so they asked us to take that program on, which just fit and made sense for us. But we do work very closely with the Downtown Seattle Business Association. We do a lot of reciprocal benefits, so they let us and our leadership attend their events, and we let them attend ours for free, and because we really want to be a part of each other's communities.
But are you involved in developing anything to improve Seattle? Bring businesses and things of that sort?
We are probably the very last two people on staff that should be answering that question, just because the two of us together make up the scholarship fund team. But I do know that at minimum, the work that we do in Olympia with advocacy is definitely impacting those small businesses. We just had this week a business roundtable with medium-sized businesses. We're also bringing together our corporate partners. And so GSBA really looks at itself as a place to convene and to bring people together to solve some of those problems. So we're not necessarily the ones making those decisions, but we're the ones convening those businesses together to have a stronger voice together.
Yeah. So just an example of these roundtables, things that come out of that, then we try to address. So for example, with the Capitol Hill group, safety is a concern that they have that comes out of those discussions in these roundtables, and so then we create the programming to talk about it. Say, okay, well, let's bring together city officials. Let's bring together folks that can do something about safety in Capitol Hill, and let's have a discussion about next steps. So we have our safety forum coming up, which is a result of these businesses in these roundtables. A lot of work to do coming out of the pandemic for not only safety in downtown, but just business in general. I mean, definitely can see shuttered businesses continuing out of the pandemic, and that's where these roundtables come together to talk about, well, how can we stimulate downtown again? How can we work on folks feeling comfortable that their business would thrive? It'll take us years of work, I believe, to come out of that, but the conversation is being had, for sure.
What are you hearing from your young people about the climate for them in our local Seattle schools? And what are you hearing as you go east in the state?
That is a great question. As I talk with scholars, folks feel pretty grateful to be in Seattle. And what tends to happen as you leave a metropolitan area is you start to feel more isolated. From community, from services, from feeling like you fit in. And Eastern Washington does impact, I'm trying to say this nicely. I lived in Eastern Washington also.
Less welcoming.
Thank you. It impacts your ability to feel safe as an LGBTQ plus person. It just does. And also resources. So I think one of the biggest examples that just kind of hit me came from one of our coworkers. For gender affirming care, to be able to move forward in gender affirming care, as a trans woman, one of the first things that you're asked to do is hair removal, facial hair removal. And it's usually like, that's the only way you can move forward. This is one of those steps. And there is one person who provides that service in Spokane for all of Eastern Washington. So I think that's the greatest example I can talk about when we talk about Seattle versus leaving the metropolitan area as far as services. It's incredible to me that that's where we're at. It's something that once it's brought to us, then that's where we try to take action. So we're like, okay, what can we do about this? And so working with our scholars to say, who has an interest? Where could we get you an internship? Where could we make sure that we're providing you the education so that you could fill this gap? Because these are the gaps that our scholars experience outside of the Seattle area. So as a scholarship, we're really also trying to be very intentional about just physically getting out of Seattle and making sure that students know we exist. And so in Seattle schools, we have a great relationship with a person who's designated as the LGBTQ plus health person for students in the Seattle schools. That is their job. That's pretty phenomenal that that job exists. It's the only school district that has it in Washington. But they're great about knowing about us, they're getting me in front of students, and we're making sure that they know that we exist. And so that relationship is pretty fabulous. And most Seattle high schools have good support systems within them. Whether it's a student group, there's a counselor that they can go to, or we have this person who's really looking out for these, making sure these programs exist in all Seattle high schools. But when you leave Seattle, that also starts to dissipate as far as school systems. And just somebody who taught in Eastern Washington, also, there wasn't that. You didn't have support for a school group or a counselor or a teacher to put a pride flag in their classroom, to support an after-school club where students could come together. Just to find their community. It just wasn't the same.
I have a question about the nature of your organization. You're talking about businesses. Excuse me. Business roundtable and whatnot. Are you a membership organization with dues-paying business members? In other words, how are you funded?
Yes, the Business Chamber is funded in a membership, as a membership organization with roughly 1,300 members we have, which is so much more than any other LGBTQ chamber around, that we're often the one that all of the other chambers are looking to. What are they doing? How can we replicate that? Yeah, and then the scholarship fund is actually a separate 501c3 nonprofit. So all of the donations to scholarship are tax deductible in a way that it isn't on the membership side, which is a 501c6.
Okay, well, I was on the board of People's Memorial Association for a couple of years when John Eric Rolfstedt was our director, and I'm pretty sure he joined us. And I was just going to point out that, I mean, obviously, not everybody is necessarily all 100% lesbian, gay, and so on, but it's a statement of we're allies, and some of us might be, and some of us are not, or we haven't figured it out, or whatever. But anyway, but it was like we were on the hill, you guys were on the hill, anyway, and it was like we're just going to do this. I was the treasurer. I was like, of course. I don't think it was terribly expensive, but you have some kind of a directory or a listing of your members.
We do.
Right, so that if somebody does join under the 501c4, which is the membership group, then you can scan those businesses to see if you want to support them. I mean, that's part of what the chamber does, right?
Yes, and we have a lot of wonderful allied businesses, and have for a long time. We've always been welcoming LGBTQ plus and allied Chamber of Commerce. The first thing that comes to mind is a husband and wife who volunteer with me every year at Equalux. And I asked them the first year how they came to find out about us, and they said that they had an optometry clinic, and they had been members for over a decade and got a lot of business and loved the connection that they had with GSBA, and in their retirement don't have the same amount of income to be able to participate in different ways, but they volunteer every single year at our event. So yeah, really great allied people as well.
In connection with Karen's question about how GSBA is funded, as a member for decades, I can tell you that the 1,300 members is all the more remarkable because how incredibly expensive it is to be a member.
I believe it's $495 for a small business.
You're right, and we also recognize that starting out brand new micro businesses of sole proprietors cannot afford those numbers. So we are also have an access membership for folks, really just to get them started. It's pretty nominal fee for that one on our access side, just to be able to support first year brand new businesses and still get them connected to our community. I want to say that it goes as low as $25 a month, just to be able to get them connected to GSBA. And then hopefully, because folks love supporting our membership, then their business will continue to grow and they'll make it to that level.
We also made a commitment to support all of our members through the pandemic, whether they could pay or not. And so part of why our numbers did not go down is that we made contact with each of the businesses and said, are you in a place to be able to support this? You know, knowing that we need enough to be able to still survive as an organization, but also knowing that our purpose and mission is to support those businesses, and we didn't want to turn anyone away.
If there are no other questions.
If that is it for the evening, I want to thank Jeff and Stacy for their wonderful presentation, and thank you all for attending.
I think this has been what our committee is all about, which is education and getting to know each other better. So thank you for coming. We thank our John Pound on the video and Risa for always staying late for us and making this happen. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.